Okay, hello everyone. Today I want to showcase a project I've built with Claude Code. This project is probably 90 to 95% done by Claude, a large language model Anthropic has created. Now, just a little background. I'm not a developer. Okay, I came from business school. My degree was in business technology management, so it is tech adjacent. But I distinctly remember us in our last year taking a VBA course. For those of you that don't know, VBA is this archaic Excel language meant to write scripts for Excel. So we were learning and we just did not understand how to program. It was very difficult for us. So fast forward, at the end of the course, we needed to do a group project. So in this group project, we decided to recreate the snake game in VBA. Now, of course, us 5 business students, we weren't going to code something from scratch. So we went online. We made sure that it was okay with the prof, of course. But we went online. We grabbed some old version, made some edits, changed the code around a little bit, and it barely ran. I think we got a passing grade for this project. That was about 8 to 10 years ago. 5 business students, 2 weeks. And then now today, something like that would take like 10 seconds. You just type into Claude, I want to create the snake game, and it'll just do it immediately. So it's completely trivial. The rate of technology increasing is just so insane. And that brings us today. I wanted to showcase this fairly basic project, but admittedly would take me as a human, if I built this thing from scratch, 2 weeks. With AI, this took about 3 to 5 hours. I had to make some decision choices, some architectural design choices, but really the implementation, the code, was all done by Claude Code. So let's take a look. The end result is a dashboard. Essentially, I wanted to analyze Japanese music trends from Spotify. So here we can see we have an overview of the tracks that we analyzed. What are the popularity, Japanese versus non-Japanese, because I want to take a look at some non-Japanese artists as well. And then we have Artist Explorer. We have things like filters, right? We have an interesting plot down here showcasing what the distribution looks like for the different artists. Genre analysis, looking at the different genre and what kind of popularity they look like on Spotify. Now, this is interesting, audio features. So I want to talk about this a little bit. Audio features are basically like what key, BPM, danceability. I think it's more interesting. However, Spotify deprecated the API, so I had to use AudioBrain to kind of enhance my data. But even then, it was kind of shit. We only have 63 tracks here. But even with 63 tracks, we can see some interesting things. Like, most of the songs are medium energy. We have major chord, of course, less minor chords, and just stuff like that. And then let's take a look at Insight. So here we can see artists' career span, which is pretty interesting, I found. How many tracks they release throughout their lifespan. And then what are the different artists on the billboards. At some point, they would have reached very high popularity on Spotify. What does that trend look like? I can see some names here that I recognize. You get the point, okay? So this is the end dashboard. It's not super in-depth, but, we're getting somewhere here, okay? Now let's take a look at the repo itself. So this repo is basically the entire app. We're dealing with getting the API from Spotify, pulling the data out, enriching the data with Acoustic Brain, and then dumping that into a database. And then we use dbt to transform the data to create models, following a medallion architecture, which is data engineering in the big corporate world. We have bronze, silver, gold. And then eventually your product, which is your dashboard. So let's take a look at the README here. Now keep in mind, all the documentation is generated by AI as well. So it's really interesting that the documentation is this good. If I were to code something like this, my documentation would look like crap. But here we can see the documentation is very detailed. Of course, a lot of this is boilerplate, and that's why AI is so good at this. But it's still very impressive to me. Okay, so let's take a look at VS Code itself. So basically here we have the VS Code extension Claude Code. This entire project is basically created by me chatting with Claude here with natural language, coming up with architectural decisions. When we run into an issue, we troubleshoot it. But it is able to do things like create folders, create files, call APIs, git commit to push everything to GitHub, update documentation. It is able to follow through a to-do list. So as you update the project more and more, you're able to actually update the knowledge base. We're using retrieval augmented generation here, basically. When you're chatting with this Claude Code terminal here, you're essentially asking it to look at your code base as well as English, your knowledge base, in the form of your README file or your project timeline, whatever artifacts that you may create. So we can reduce a lot of hallucination that way. So here we can see that, here's some of our DBT models. It's just SQL. I didn't write any of this, right? It's just SQL queries creating your models with DBT. Here we have our gold tables, your YAML file for configuration. And then your silver tables. And then bronze is actually in the source, which is here. Now, interesting, we can see that the way that this database works is it's using DuckDB. It's just one file. And DBT is creating the different schemas and tables within this DuckDB file, which I found to be pretty interesting. Completely different from Snowflake, which is what I use at work. I thought to use DBT Core because I do use DBT Cloud at work, and DBT Core is just a free local version of that. So it was interesting. And now here we have our Python script. Essentially, the Python script here is just some basic data transformation and pulling the API. So we're trying to enrich our Spotify data with Acoustic Bring. Didn't really work very well, only got 63 tracks. Unfortunately, Acoustic Bring was deprecated in 2022, so we didn't have data past that point. This one is just to extract the API from Spotify. Now, I want to talk about something interesting here, which is it's actually kind of hard to filter for Japanese music. If you filter for just J-pop or J-rock anime, you don't actually get that much for some reason. Probably because the API can only call so many at once, so you have to continuously loop through and do pagination, which I didn't want to do. So what I did was I actually searched up playlists, and then from the playlist, just looking at metadata of the playlist, like is it anime related, J-pop related, or even just the title itself, and then take a look at the playlist and extract Japanese songs that way, which I found was pretty interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole project. Like, I would say if I were to do this myself, writing the actual Python, creating the SQL models, creating the dashboard Python itself here, yeah, it would take me freaking forever, like 2 weeks, as I said, at least 2 weeks. But with Claude Code, we're able to get to this final product here in 2 to 3 days. Now, is it going to start hallucinating as the code base gets bigger? Probably. You're probably going to have to double check its work, really understand what it's doing, and have that back and forth debugging and architectural design stuff. But I would say in terms of actually understanding what this Python is doing and what the SQL is doing, it's like not that relevant. I'm not trying to scale to millions of users here where performance needs to be squeezed out. I just need it to work. And for something like these, just portfolio projects, this is freaking perfect. So yeah, basically in conclusion, this was an interesting project, my first project, trying to see what the limitation of using AI and Claude Code is today. And I feel like this technology, of course, is getting better and better as we speak. I might get replaced in 2 to 3 years, 5 years, who knows? And it's just crazy. Like, this is absolutely batshit insane to me that somebody like me could make something like this. And that's about it. I hope somebody finds this interesting.